So Jay, I want to ask you about English Quran translations, that we should use as a Christian to study or in witnessing to Muslims. Do you have one or more that you prefer, and why?
It's a real problem, Jim. I'll tell you why. Because there's a good 125 different translations of the Quran in English alone, and there's a whole gamut. But the vast majority of Qurans that are translated, remember, they don't believe you can translate them into English. In fact, this one I have here, it says the interpretation of the meaning of the Noble Quran. The reason they do that is they assume that the Arabic language is untranslatable. It is so holy, it is so superior to all other languages. There's no way that any other language could come close to incorporate the ideas that are there. That's why they put that there. Now, if that is the case, then you need to ask Muslims, well, then what and how can I understand the Quran? Which translation can I go to? The one they're going to is this one right here. This is the one that there is recommended. It's called the Hilali Khan translation. It's two different men, Dr. Muhammad Taqiyuddin al-Hilali and Dr. Muhammad Muhsin Khan. We just say Hilali Khan. That's the one that they're pushing all over the world, but it's absolutely hopeless as a translation. You would not accept this translation if we were to do this to the Bible. And the reason why, if you go through it, you will see they've mistranslated. Let me give you an example. Chapter 3, verse 55, which is the reference to God speaking to Jesus, saying, I will cause you to die. But it says in the English, the translation here, I will put you to sleep. I will cause you to sleep. Now, the word in Arabic is mutawafik. Mutawafika for you. Mutawafika, I will cause you. And tawafik, and if you talk to anybody who's an Arabist, they will say, well, that means cause you to die. There's no other way to translate that. So they've taken die out and put sleep in there. And the reason why is very obvious, because that would contradict chapter 4, verse 157, where it's very clear that Jesus did not die on the cross. Another died in his place. For they killed him not, they thought it was so, another he was given his image. Can you see the problem with that? How are you going to then translate it? So I would suggest if you're going to get a translation, use this one because they demand it, but make sure you get the Arabic with it. So this is both English and Arabic side to side, so that you can show the Arabic and you can see mutawafika. Now ask them, now how do you translate that? Anybody that knows Arabic has realized that's a mistranslation.
So even with the Arabic in the Quran, would our Muslim friends that we're sharing with, would they still call that the Quran or not?
The Arabic, yes.
The Arabic, yes.
So this would be the Quran. This would be nothing more than the interpretation of the meaning of the Noble Quran. So that is the interpretation of the meaning. It's not translatable. Now, here's what I love. When Muslims throw that at me, I love to throw the Mickey back on them. I put it right back on their lap, say, hold on a minute. Are you telling me that this book is untranslatable? That you cannot translate the Arabic? Are you saying that the only language that this can be understood in is Arabic? What does that say about your God then? Because that suggests to me that your God can only speak one language.
Correct.
Whereas this book right here, this is translated into 2,500 languages. And in every one you can understand. What does that say about this God? Well, it looks like this God can be understood by everyone. So which is the more universal revelation? Come on home. We've got the bigger, the better book. That's why I keep you notice my Bible's bigger than my Quran.
Absolutely.
I do that purposely, so not only you can see that, but everybody else can see. This is the bigger, the better book. But by using that argument, you're then putting it right back on their laps and saying, if you want to call this the interpretation of the meaning, I don't even have to say that about the Bible. Anybody can understand it, even in Arabic. And you can understand it as well.
Correct. Any other translations that you like or favor other than the Hilali?
Yeah, now for my own private study, Muslims won't let me use this in public. My own private study, I would go to Arbery. It does to the Quran, it does to the Arabic what the NASB does to our Bible. So it takes the Arabic and it gives it systematically. It's not easy to read because of that, because it doesn't flow like the others do. The other problem is, if you notice, almost every translation, even the English doesn't, it's really archaic English. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely.
It's very Victorian English.
It is.
We would not speak this kind of English today. When you ask Muslims why, when they've asked Shabir Ali, or when they asked Yusuf Ali, or even Muslim Khan, when they ask them why they kept it in this very Victorian archaic English, they think that by doing that, they're actually elevating the Quran to a status of distinction. Now, we would prefer to have our Bible written in a language we understand, right, with using idiomatic expressions that we use. And that's why NIV or whatever, the NEV or the NASB not so much, but any of the other ones, we bring it down to common layman's terminology.
What do you think about the Yusuf Ali Quran?
The Yusuf Ali al-Quran is almost exactly identical to this. There's not much difference. And that's why they're almost interchangeable. There are a few words that are different. Muslim Quran and Hilali Quran haven't really changed it that much. So you're obviously using almost the same Quran. Now here, let me just make this warning. When I give a reference, like I said, chapter 3, verse 55, if you were to look into Yusuf Ali and also Hilali in Khan, it is chapter 3, verse 55. If you were to look in Arbery, it may not be chapter 3, verse 55. If you were to look in Pickthall or Droga or any of the other ones, it may not be chapter 3, verse 55. There is no standardization of versification, which to me is absolutely anathema. Not only are the Qurans different, the verses are different. So what you have to do sometimes is you have to read about 5 verses above and 5 verses behind to get the right verse that we're talking about.
I'm glad you said that, because that's been my experience too. It's about 5 or 6 one way or the other.
Either way or the other. There's no standard. I mean, to me, we're now 1,400 years later. Can I, for heaven's sakes, get the verses correct? The verses were only introduced in the 9th and 10th century, so they were introduced at a much later. If you look at any of the earliest manuscripts, there are no verses there. And that's why there is no standard. Even today, though they call this the Hilali Khan, this is the Hafs manuscript that comes from the Hafs manuscript, which was introduced in 1924. Still, the verses still are not the same.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that nice summary on what kind of English translation we should use as a Christian. Thank you.